this has been a big risk because we didn't manage to create successfully the image of the man under that shroud.
The Shroud of Turin is perhaps the most studied artifact in human history, a 14-foot linen cloth believed by many to be the burial shroud of Jesus. For centuries, it has been revered as sacred, while also dismissed by others as a clever medieval forgery. Housed in a cathedral in Turin, Italy, this sepia-toned cloth remains an enduring mystery. Among those once skeptical was New Testament scholar Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, who now counts himself among its strongest advocates. Could the shroud hold secrets still unexplored? And was the world too quick to dismiss its mystery? The Shroud of Turin has sparked one of the fiercest debates in history. Scientists, historians, and theologians have argued for years.
An image like no other, inspiring decades of research and debate, the Shroud of Turin, that's a piece of history.
Each claiming the other is wrong. For Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, the turning point came during a visit to Notre Dame of Jerusalem. There, he didn't find religious hype or superstition. He found data, peer-reviewed studies, and real science. Could the boldest claim in Christianity that Jesus truly rose from the dead be supported by something empirical? Dr. Jeremiah Johnston believes the answer is yes. Dr. Johnston isn't just any voice in the debate. He's a respected New Testament scholar, a member of the prestigious Studiorum Novi Testamenti Societas, SNTS, and the president of Christian Thinkers Society. Beyond academia, he pours his energy into the church, serving as pastor of apologetics and cultural engagement at Prestonwood Baptist Church, and as senior fellow of Christian origins at Dallas Baptist University. His life's passion is simple but powerful: to help Christians not only believe, but also understand and explain why they believe. That passion has taken him across pulpits, classrooms, and even major media platforms. From Fox News to CNN, from Vanity Fair to Premier Christianity, Dr. Johnston has been called on to share his insights. He's written for magazines, contributed to scholarly books, and appeared on countless radio and television programs. Wherever he speaks, he has a rare gift, making complex theology clear and relatable to people of all ages. It was in this same spirit, on an episode of Almost Heretical, that Dr. Johnston shared a conviction he had come to hold with new certainty. The Shroud of Turin, the ancient linen marked with the image of a crucified man, might not just be a historical curiosity. To him, it offers real evidence of the resurrection. What he discovered pushed him to reconsider. Could modern research really be pointing back to first-century faith? The verdict that stunned the world: the carbon-14 debacle. For many people, the great debate over the Shroud of Turin seemed to end on one autumn afternoon, October 13, 1988. The scene was dramatic. The British Museum in London packed with reporters, cameras flashing, notebooks open. The world's media had gathered to hear the results of what many believed would be the final word on one of history's most mysterious artifacts. Three of the most respected laboratories in the world, Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich.
Three esteemed labs in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona carried out carbon-14 tests on the shroud.
Had been carefully chosen for the task. Each lab was given a small sample of the shroud, a piece of linen that some claimed once wrapped the body of Jesus of Nazareth. Their mission was to determine its age using radiocarbon dating, a scientific method trusted and respected for its precision. When the results were announced, they landed like a thunderclap. The cloth, according to the labs, was no relic from the 1st century. Instead, it was dated between 1260 and 1390 AD. In other words, the shroud was not the burial cloth of Christ at all, but a clever creation from the Middle Ages. Headlines around the world carried the same verdict. The Shroud of Turin was a hoax. For skeptics, the case was closed. For believers, it was a devastating blow. And for the scientific community, it seemed to be the end of the mystery. The 1988 test quickly became the most quoted piece of evidence against the shroud's authenticity. To this day, it is still used as the main argument by those who dismiss the cloth as nothing more than medieval trickery. But time has a way of reopening closed cases. In the decades since that press conference, researchers and scholars from various fields began looking closer, not just at the shroud itself, but at the way the test was conducted. What they uncovered was not a simple, airtight conclusion, but a series of troubling questions. It turned out that the issue was not with radiocarbon dating as a science, but with the sample that was tested. The piece of linen that had been removed came from a single peripheral corner of the shroud. That corner, many now argue, was not representative of the entire cloth. Evidence suggests it may have been part of a medieval repair, a patch carefully woven into the fabric centuries after the shroud's origin. If true, this meant that the 1988 results were not revealing the age of the shroud at all, but only the age of the patch. Science, as history shows us again and again, is never settled by a single test or a single announcement. What was once declared a conclusive answer is now viewed by many as a flawed experiment, one that left the greatest mystery of the Shroud of Turin very much alive. Critics of the 1988 test now say the entire case against the Shroud of Turin rested on a fatal mistake. The tiny piece of fabric that was tested did not actually represent the whole cloth at all. Instead, it came from a corner that had a very unusual history. That corner was no ordinary piece of linen. For centuries, it had been the section lifted up for public viewing and veneration, handled by countless hands. Even more importantly, it was the very spot damaged in a fire in 1532. Afterward, nuns carefully repaired it, weaving in new threads to stabilize the cloth. In other words, the labs had not tested the untouched shroud of the 1st century. They had tested a patched corner from the 16th century. One of the most powerful voices to uncover this was Ray Rogers, a chemist who had originally been a skeptic. At first, he was convinced the shroud was a medieval fake, but when he began examining the fabric more closely, he discovered something shocking. The tested corner was chemically different from the rest of the cloth. Rogers' research showed that the sample used in 1988 was not the same material as the larger linen sheet. It was a mixture, a repair patch stitched in during the Middle Ages. The problems didn't stop there. When researchers later revisited the raw data from Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich, they noticed something alarming. The 3 labs had produced results that simply didn't match one another. The numbers weren't consistent or homogeneous, which is the basic requirement for combining them into a single reliable age. Yet, that's exactly what was done back in 1988. A fresh analysis in 2010 made things even stranger. It showed that the age of the cloth depended on where on the strip the sample was taken. The numbers revealed a steady slope, about 50 years of difference per centimeter. In plain terms, the piece of fabric got younger the closer you moved along it. That discovery alone shattered the assumption that the test was clean or reliable. Even the sample's weight raised red flags. The shroud's cloth normally weighs between 23 and 25 milligrams per square centimeter, but the piece used for dating was a whopping 42.9 milligrams per square centimeter after it had been cleaned. That's nearly double the normal weight. The only explanation was foreign material. In fact, further studies suggested that as much as 42% of the sample was made up of newer threads, evidence of the medieval mending. Contamination added yet another layer of doubt. Over hundreds of years, the shroud had been exposed to fires, smoke, and thousands of human hands. It had also been in contact with bacteria and fungi, living organisms that can take in modern carbon from the air. This carbon then seeps into the fibers of the linen, making the cloth seem younger than it really is. Some researchers even found a strange coating on the threads, a brittle, plastic-like polymer that may have helped preserve the shroud, but also skewed the carbon results. Taken together, all these findings point to one conclusion. The 1988 test was not wrong because radiocarbon dating doesn't work. It was wrong because the sample wasn't truly part of the original shroud. The labs ended up dating a medieval repair patch, not the cloth itself. This is the great twist in the story of the Shroud of Turin. The single piece of evidence that was once believed to settle the debate and expose a hoax is now seen by many as the most flawed scientific test ever performed on the relic. Instead of solving the mystery, it left us with even bigger questions. If the 1988 results were invalid, how old is the shroud really? And could it be far older than anyone dared to believe? The ghost in the machine. How scientists were left speechless. With the carbon-14 test now under heavy doubt, attention turns back to the shroud's greatest mystery, the image itself. What is it? How did it get there? And could it be telling us something science still struggles to explain? The story of this mystery doesn't begin in a high-tech lab, but in a dark room in the late 19th century. In 1898, an Italian lawyer and amateur photographer named Secondo Pia was given rare permission to photograph the Shroud of Turin.
A lawyer named Secondo Pia took the first photograph of it way back in 1898.
At that time, photography was still a relatively new art, and no one had ever tried to capture the shroud through a camera lens. Pia set up his equipment, took his shots, and then went home to develop the glass plates. What he saw that night nearly made him drop them in shock. The faint, almost ghost-like image on the shroud came alive on his negatives. Instead of a blurred shadow, the figure of a man appeared with startling clarity. The most shocking detail is the image on the cloth turned out to be a perfect photographic negative. When Pia reversed his negatives, he discovered that the shroud revealed a positive image, complete with depth, detail, and contrast. This discovery sent waves of disbelief through the scientific and religious worlds. How could this be possible? In 1898, photography had existed for less than a century, yet the shroud's image had been around for hundreds of years. More importantly, the very concept of a photographic negative didn't exist until the 18th century. If someone in the Middle Ages had tried to fake the shroud, they would have had to paint in reverse, shading light where there should be dark, and dark where there should be light. No one in the 14th century, or even centuries later, could have done this. It was an artistic and scientific impossibility. This revelation was only the beginning. Decades later, in 1978, a group of over 30 scientists, engineers, and medical experts from different fields gathered under the name of the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP. Many of them were skeptics at the start. They weren't there to prove a miracle. They wanted to apply the best tools of modern science to see if the shroud could be explained. For 5 days, they worked non-stop. The Vatican gave them an unprecedented 120 uninterrupted hours with the cloth. They photographed it with advanced cameras, scanned it with different kinds of light, measured its fibers under microscopes, and analyzed its chemical makeup. Every test was designed to answer a simple question. Was this image painted, dyed, burned, or made by human hands? The more they studied it, the more baffled they became. The image wasn't made of paint, pigment, or any known substance. It wasn't brushed on, smeared, or pressed into the cloth. In fact, it wasn't even inside the threads. The image lay only on the very top surface of the linen fibers, just a few microns thick, so delicate that if you scraped the surface away, it would vanish completely. No medieval forger could have done that. No artist, no matter how skilled, could paint something invisible to the eye but perfectly revealed in photographic negatives. What STURP found left many of the scientists dumbfounded. The shroud image was unlike anything ever produced by human art or technology. The surprises didn't end with the photographs. In 1978, the STURP scientists decided to test the shroud using a special machine originally designed by NASA, the VP-8 image analyzer. This device was created for space exploration, meant to turn light and shadow data into 3D maps of planets and moons. Normally, when you feed it an ordinary photo or painting, the results come out warped and distorted. Faces look stretched, bodies look flat, and the whole picture collapses into nonsense. But when the team fed the shroud's image into the VP-8, something astonishing happened. Instead of a messy blur, the screen lit up with a perfectly natural three-dimensional relief of a human body, clear, precise, and balanced. It was as if the cloth itself had encoded depth information, recording the space between the fabric and the body it once touched. No artwork in history carries this kind of hidden 3D code. Paintings, drawings, or even photographs don't store spatial data in their images. Yet, the shroud did. It was, somehow, a three-dimensional map of a man's body. The scientists had no category for this. They could only admit they had stumbled onto something completely unique. Chemical tests revealed that the image wasn't painted, dyed, or stained. Instead, the fibers of the linen themselves were discolored, but only on their very outer surface. The image reached no deeper than 0.2 microns. To picture how thin that is, imagine slicing a single human hair into 200 pieces. The image rested only on the top layer of one of those slices. Even more baffling, the image could be scraped off the surface of the linen without damaging the cloth underneath. And yet, there was no trace of pigment or brush strokes, no directionality, no pressure marks, nothing that pointed to an artist's hand. This was no painting. For decades, skeptics had claimed that some clever medieval forger must have created the shroud. But even today, with lasers and advanced imaging techniques, scientists cannot reproduce the shroud's strange microscopic surface discoloration. In the end, after years of testing, the STURP team had to admit something that went against their instincts as scientists. Their official report stated that while the bloodstains and scourge marks could be explained by direct contact with a real body, no combination of physical, chemical, biological, or medical circumstances could explain the image itself. That was their conclusion, a scientific admission of defeat. The shroud was not a painting, not a forgery, and not a trick of the eye. It remained an unsolved mystery, an image with no known origin, no scientific explanation, and no parallel in the history of art or technology. The art of the impossible, debunking the forgery theories. To believe the shroud is a forgery is to believe that a single unknown medieval artist or forger possessed a level of scientific, forensic, and anatomical knowledge that was hundreds of years ahead of their time. It requires a belief that they accomplished the impossible. For centuries, opponents of the shroud's authenticity have proposed various forgery theories, each attempting to explain one or two of the shroud's bizarre properties. But when confronted with the totality of the evidence, each theory falls spectacularly short. The STURP team conducted exhaustive tests using X-ray, fluorescence, and microchemistry on the fibrils and found no trace of pigments, paints, or dyes. The image is not painted on the cloth. The cloth itself is the image. More recently, theories have emerged that suggest the shroud was a form of medieval religious art created using more sophisticated methods. A 3D digital analysis conducted by Brazilian expert Cicero Moraes showed that the image on the shroud is consistent with an impression made from a low-relief sculpture, not a full 3D human body. The theory is compelling because a cloth draped over a full body would produce a distorted image, an effect known as the Agamemnon mask effect, while the shroud's image is flat and undistorted. However, this theory fails on its most critical point. The shroud contains perfect 3D spatial data, encoding the distance from the cloth to the body. This is a property that could not have been created by contact with a flat, low-relief sculpture. The sculpture theory explains the lack of distortion, but completely fails to account for the most profound scientific discovery of the STURP team. Another intriguing, though incomplete theory comes from Professor Stephen Mattingly, who suggests that the image was created by a biofilm from bacteria. He theorized that as the crucified man lay dying, the open wounds on his body would have been teeming with microbes. These bacteria, he said, could have produced a sticky film, a kind of biological glue that coated his skin. When the linen cloth was wrapped around him, the film would have transferred onto the fabric. Over time, the fatty acids in the microbes could have oxidized, leaving behind a faint yellowish image, something like a natural photograph. It sounds clever, and Mattingly even tried it out himself. In his lab, he pressed his own hand, coated with bacteria, against cloth, and later watched as an image appeared. Not perfect, he admitted, but darn close. But that admission is the problem. The shroud's image is not close. It is exact. The figure on the cloth shows perfect anatomical proportions, a precise front and back alignment, and details so fine they have been measured down to the microscopic level. A bacterial biofilm that produces smudged, patchy images simply cannot account for the crisp clarity of the shroud. And here is where the debate takes on an almost playful edge. For decades now, a standing challenge has been issued. Anyone who can reproduce the Shroud of Turin with all of its unique qualities will be awarded $1 million. The rules are simple. Create an image that matches the shroud's depth, precision, three-dimensional coding, and microscopic surface discoloration, and the prize is yours.
The Vatican has never said it is Christ on the cloth, but in 1988 it allowed tests to be made on samples from the shroud.
Despite centuries of theories and decades of modern technology, no one has ever claimed the money. No painting has matched it. No scorching has come close. No bacterial film has risen to the challenge. The logic is hard to ignore. If the shroud is a forgery, then the method must exist. If the method exists, someone should be able to reproduce it. Yet after countless attempts, no one has succeeded. That leaves us with the unsettling conclusion that the shroud is not only unexplained, but perhaps unexplainable by ordinary means. The blueprint of crucifixion, forensic and biological proofs. The scientific inquiry into the shroud is not just about the impossibility of the image, it is also about the man it depicts. The forensic and biological evidence on the cloth provides a chilling and medically accurate blueprint of crucifixion, a level of detail that would have been completely unavailable to a medieval artist. First, and perhaps most importantly, the blood is real. The reddish-brown stains across the cloth were analyzed by doctors John Heller and Alan Adler of the STURP team. Their peer-reviewed analysis confirmed the presence of real human blood, specifically type AB. The tests also identified hemoglobin, bilirubin, and serum albumin. Bilirubin, a byproduct of liver function, is elevated in cases of extreme trauma. That detail alone lines up perfectly with what we know happened to the man wrapped in the shroud. His body had been pushed to the very limits of pain. And here's something even more decisive. Scientists confirmed that the bloodstains appeared on the linen before the faint image of the body itself was formed. Think about that for a second. That means a real body, bleeding and broken, was laid inside the cloth. This fact rules out the idea of a clever painter faking the image centuries later. The blood wasn't brushed on afterward. It seeped into the fabric first, just as it would if someone had actually been there. The shroud, in many ways, is like a medical textbook on crucifixion. It shows a man scourged with a Roman whip, his body carrying more than 100 deep, round wounds. The blood trails reveal a man who had been beaten again and again before nails were driven into his flesh. Even the crown of thorns matches reality, not the neat halo often painted in medieval art, but a cruel cap of thorns pressed into the scalp, puncturing the skin from every angle and sending blood streaming down the face and neck. His suffering is etched into the linen. You can see where his beard was ripped out. His nose looks broken, as if struck hard by a soldier's fist or club. And then there's the nails. Here lies one of the most striking clues of authenticity. In almost every medieval painting of Jesus, the nails are shown driven through the palms. But doctors now know that wouldn't work. The flesh there would tear under the weight. The shroud shows something different. Nails driven straight through the wrists, the only spot that could hold a body on a cross. How could a forger in the 1300s have known that when medical science hadn't yet figured it out?
Now we know that the burns clearly are the result of heat because they fluoresce under ultraviolet light.
Then there's the wound on the side. The shroud shows clear signs of fluid around it. Doctors recognize this immediately: a mixture of blood and a watery serum, the telltale result of fluid building up in the lungs, a common cause of death in crucifixion victims. This small but crucial detail matches the Gospel account of John, where a soldier pierced Jesus' side and blood and water flowed out. Put together, the evidence is overwhelming. It's not just that the shroud reflects a crucifixion, it reflects the crucifixion. It captures details no medieval artist could have imagined, let alone understood. Blood chemistry, accurate nail placement, pulmonary edema. As Adler summed it up, this blood chemistry could not have been faked by a forger in any century, much less the 14th. A trail through time, the missing centuries uncovered. The final, and perhaps most difficult piece of the puzzle, is the shroud's history. For centuries, skeptics have pointed to the 1,300-year historical gap between the crucifixion and the shroud's first undisputed appearance in Lirey, France, in the 1350s. However, new research and a re-evaluation of old documents have begun to fill in the missing centuries, transforming the shroud's journey from an inexplicable absence to a compelling tale of secrecy and protection. The undisputed historical record begins with a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny, who displayed the cloth in a church he founded in Lirey in 1353. The shroud was quickly denounced as a fraud by the local bishop, Pierre d'Arcy, who claimed an artist had confessed to forging it. The Catholic Church, under Pope Clement VII, eventually declared it an icon, not a relic, allowing it to be displayed as long as its man-made nature was acknowledged. From there, the shroud's history is well documented. Margaret de Charny, Geoffroy's granddaughter, illegally sold the shroud to the House of Savoy in 1453, and the relic was eventually moved to Turin in 1578, where it has remained ever since. But what about the missing centuries? Historians and scholars have long theorized that the shroud was secretly held and protected by the Knights Templar after the sack of Constantinople in 1204. This theory has recently gained significant traction with the unearthing of new documents. A Vatican researcher, Barbara Frail, found a memoir from a Templar initiation ceremony that described an initiate being led into a hidden room and shown a long linen cloth that bore the impressed figure of a man, which he was ordered to kiss 3 times. This account supports the theory that the Templars hid the shroud because of papal orders of excommunication for anyone involved in looting relics from Constantinople. The shroud, with its clear proof of a human body, would have been an important antidote to the Cathar heresy, which was gaining strength and denied the humanity of Christ. This Templar theory connects the shroud to another famous relic, the Mandylion of Edessa, a towel that bore only the facial image of Jesus and disappeared from Constantinople after the Fourth Crusade in 1204. Shroud proponents believe the Mandylion was, in fact, the shroud, folded into eighths to show only the face. The historical narrative is further supported by hard, verifiable scientific data. Max Frey, a criminologist on the STURP team, conducted a pollen analysis of the shroud and found spores from plants that only grow in Jerusalem, Edessa, Constantinople, and Athens. These are the exact locations the shroud is believed to have been on its secret journey through history. The pollen provides a scientific witness to the very journey that the historical documents and Templar theories describe, transforming the shroud's history from a long silence into a secret, unfolding story. The historical and scientific evidence, though from completely different fields, converge to tell the same story, creating a powerful argument that is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The final proof, a resurrection you can measure. A final, more profound question remains. If a human hand did not create the image, and if natural processes cannot account for it, then what did? The official STURP conclusion stated that while the image was produced by a process that resulted in oxidation, dehydration, and conjugation of the polysaccharide structure of the microfibrils of the linen itself, no combination of known chemical, physical, biological, or medical methods could account for the totality of the image's properties. This is the most honest admission of all. Science has reached its limit. The Shroud of Turin is an artifact that forces science to confront the possibility of the supernatural. The Shroud of Turin, with its perfect 3D code and photographic negative properties, is the only image of its kind in the world. It is a physical object that points to something beyond physics. Some scholars now propose a radical, but a scientifically coherent theory. The image was formed by an unexplainable, instantaneous burst of energy, a fall-through moment when Jesus's body passed through the cloth in a flash of light. Italian physicists at ENEA laboratories conducted experiments to replicate the image and concluded that the energy required to create the image would be a massive 34,000 billion watts of light, lasting for a mere 12 billionths of a second. This level of energy is far beyond the capabilities of any human-made device. Yet it is exactly the kind of event that could produce an image with the shroud's unique, non-directional, superficial, and photographic properties. The Shroud of Turin is a physical record of a transformation. It is not an image of a man simply disappearing from his tomb. It is an image of his body transforming into a new resurrected state, leaving a measurable imprint on the cloth that surrounded it. It is a natural response to a supernatural event, a moment where the material world was imprinted by the immaterial. Dr. Jeremiah Johnston's journey from skeptic to believer shows what happens when evidence refuses to be ignored. The shroud doesn't demand blind faith. It demands a response. Because if this linen really holds the imprint of resurrection, then the greatest claim of Christianity may also be the most scientifically supported. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this ride, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. We'll see you in the next video.